Well, now gather round, sweet things, and let an old lady tell you a tale that's been locked in my heart for more decades than I care to count. I'm 99 years old now. The title says 101. A little birdie told me you youngsters like a bit of drama, but I'm getting there. And I've got stories that could fill a library. And speaking of stories, if you're joining me for the first time, or if you just love hearing these kinds of real-life dramas unfold, please do an old gal a kindness and hit that subscribe button right now, and ding that little notification bell too. That way, you won't miss out on any of the secrets I'm finally ready to share. And hey, a little tap on that like button always warms my heart. All right, now that we've got that settled, let me tell you. You are going to want to stay glued to your seat for this entire story, because what my abusive boss did to me while I was pregnant, way back in the 40s, and what my very own brother was caught filming. Honey, it's a shocker, and the way it all unravels in the end, you just won't see it coming. It all started back in, let's see, must have been 1945. The war was just winding down, and there was this feeling in the air, like anything was possible. I was a young thing then, barely 20, full of vim and vigor, and so proud to have landed a job as a secretary at Henderson Textiles. Mr. Henderson, he was the big boss, a man who seemed respectable enough at first glance. Tall, always in a starched suit, with a voice that could command a room. I thought, Eleanor, you've really made it. Lord have mercy if I'd only known. I just found out I was expecting my first baby, little Michael, bless his heart. My husband, Arthur, was still overseas, waiting to be demobilized, so it was just me, trying to make ends meet and prepare for our little one. Back in my day, a woman working while pregnant, especially in an office, wasn't exactly common, but I needed the money. And Mr. Henderson at first, he seemed, not pleased, but he tolerated it. Or so I thought. It started subtly. A little extra work piled on my desk at the end of the day. Comments about how my condition might be slowing me down. Are you sure you're up to this, Eleanor? He'd ask, with this slick little smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I'd just plaster on a brave face and say, yes, Mr. Henderson, of course, Mr. Henderson. What else could I do? Jobs were scarce, and a pregnant woman complaining? That was a fast track to the breadline. My younger brother, Thomas, had just started working there too in the mailroom. He was a quiet boy, always tinkering with things, observant. He was about 17, I reckon. Skinny as a rake, with these big, watchful eyes. I didn't think much of it at the time, him being around. He was just there, doing his rounds, delivering papers, always quiet. Too quiet, maybe. Could he have known then what was really going on, or what he was about to get himself into? As my belly grew, so did Mr. Henderson's. Well, I guess you'd call it impatience. No, that's too kind. It was cruelty, plain and simple. He'd call me into his office and just berate me for tiny things that weren't even my fault. The lighting in his office was always dim, making his face look shadowy and mean. He'd lean back in his big leather chair, puffing on a cigar, the smoke curling around him like a shroud, and he'd just pick me apart. My typing speed, the way I answered the phone, even the way I walked. Waddling like a duck, Eleanor, he snorted one day. I felt my cheeks burn, but I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. You won't believe what he'd say next some days. I'd go to the little ladies' room, lock myself in a stall, and just cry. Silent tears, because you couldn't let anyone see you crack. You just couldn't. I'd pray for Arthur to come home, pray for the baby to be healthy, pray for this nightmare to end, but it only got worse. He started making me stay late, knowing I had a long bus ride home, knowing I was exhausted. A little overtime won't hurt you, or the encumbrance. He'd sneer. Encumbrance. That's what he called my baby, my sweet, Innocent, unborn child. The nerve of that man. I remember one particular afternoon. The air in the office was thick and sticky, the kind of summer heat that saps all your energy. He'd had me retype a 20-page report 3 times, each time finding some new, minuscule fault. My back ached, my ankles were swollen like balloons, and all I wanted was to go home and lie down. He called me in again. "Eleanor," he said, his voice like gravel. "This report is still not up to par. You'll stay until it's perfect. I don't care if it takes all night." I just stood there, swaying a little. I felt faint. "Mr. Henderson," I whispered, I don't feel very well." He just laughed, a short barking laugh. "Don't try that with me, girl. Get it done." I turned to leave, my vision blurring, and that's when I saw Thomas. He was standing in the doorway of the mailroom, just down the hall, half hidden in the shadows. He wasn't looking at me with sympathy. His face was blank, unreadable, but he was holding something small and dark, about the size of a thick book. He saw me see him, and he sort of flinched, pulling it closer to his chest, then ducked back into the mailroom like a startled rabbit. What was that about? Was he just avoiding Henderson's temper? Or was it something else entirely? Something that would take me decades to understand? I swear on my grave I didn't know what to make of it. But that image of him, clutching that dark object, it stuck with me. This wasn't just about Henderson's cruelty anymore, was it? Something else was afoot, and my own brother was in the thick of it. So, there was Thomas, my own flesh and blood, acting stranger than a $3 bill. I'd catch him in the periphery, you know? Always just there. Sometimes, I'd look up from my typewriter, that infernal machine clattering away, and I'd see him at the far end of the hallway, or peeking around a filing cabinet. And often he'd have that thing, that boxy-looking object. Sometimes it was tucked under his arm. Sometimes he'd be fiddling with it. What was it? A newfangled camera, maybe? Thomas was always keen on gadgets. But why would he be bringing a camera to work, and why would he be so secretive about it? Was he trying to catch Henderson, or was he watching me for some other reason? The questions just kept piling up. "What in tarnation are you doing, Tommy?" I asked him one day during my short lunch break, which I usually spent nibbling a sandwich at my desk because Mr. Henderson frowned on extended absences. He jumped like I'd caught him with his hand in the cookie jar. "Nothin', Ellie," he mumbled, stuffing whatever he was holding into his satchel. "Just looking around." "Looking around? You look like you're spying on someone, boy." I tried to keep my tone light, but honestly, his behavior was starting to give me the heebie-jeebies. On top of everything else with Henderson, now my brother was acting like a spook. What could he possibly be up to? He just shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "It's a big office, lots to see." And then he scurried off. Lord have mercy, that boy could be frustrating. If you think that was odd, wait till you hear what happened next. Meanwhile, Mr. Henderson was turning the screws tighter. He started, well, I don't know how else to put it, but he started to get a little too close for comfort. He'd stand over my shoulder while I typed, his breath hot on my neck, smelling faintly of stale tobacco and something sour. He'd accidentally brush against me in the narrow aisles between desks. My skin would crawl. I'd try to shrink away, make myself smaller, but there was nowhere to go in that cramped office. One time, he put his hand on my shoulder, supposedly to steady me as I was reaching for a file on a high shelf. His fingers squeezed, just a little too hard, lingering there. "Careful there, Eleanor," he'd said, his voice all syrupy and false. "Wouldn't want you to take a tumble. Bad for business." The way he said business sent a shiver down my spine. I wanted to scream. I wanted to slap his hand away. But I was frozen. The fear, it was like ice in my veins, paralyzing me. Who would believe me? A pregnant girl against the powerful Mr. Henderson. They'd say I was hysterical, hormonal, making things up to get attention or sympathy. Back in my day, honey, a woman's word didn't carry much weight against a man's, especially a man with money and position. It was a lonely, terrifying place to be. And through all this, there was Thomas, watching, always watching. Did he see these things? Did he see Henderson's leering smiles, his too close posture, the way my face would pale when he approached? If he did, he never said a word. Not one single word to me. And that silence, it started to feel like a betrayal all its own. Was he scared? Or did he just not care? The thought twisted like a knife in my gut. My own brother. How could he just stand by? Or was he doing something I couldn't possibly fathom? The days bled into weeks, and the weeks into months. I was getting bigger, clumsier, and more exhausted with each passing day. The baby was due in late autumn, Arthur wrote, saying he'd be home soon, but soon felt like a lifetime away when every day was a battle. One particularly awful Tuesday, Henderson had been on a rampage all morning. Nothing was right. The coffee was too weak. The post was late. My reports were allegedly full of errors he couldn't quite pinpoint but knew were there. He was like a storm cloud, thundering through the office, making everyone miserable. He called me in late in the afternoon. I was already packing up, my hands trembling with fatigue and relief that the day was almost over. "Eleanor!" he barked, not even looking up from his papers. "I need you to come in on Saturday. We're doing inventory." My heart sank into my shoes. "Saturday, Mr. Henderson? But the doctor said I need to rest, especially on weekends." My voice was small, pleading. He finally looked up, and his eyes were cold as chips of Arctic ice. "The doctor doesn't sign your paycheck, Eleanor. I do. Be here, 8 o'clock sharp, or don't bother coming in on Monday." That was it. That was the last straw. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My job, my livelihood, the money I desperately needed for my baby. He knew he had me over a barrel. I nodded, numbly. "Yes, Mr. Henderson." As I walked out of his office, my vision tunneled. I felt dizzy, sick to my stomach. I stumbled, catching myself on the doorframe. And there, at the end of the hall, by the water cooler, was Thomas. He was looking right at me, and for a split second, I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes. Pity, anger, I couldn't tell. He was holding that strange box again, but this time he wasn't trying to hide it. He was holding it up, almost aiming it. What was he doing? Was he taking a picture? Of me? In that state of distress? The thought was horrifying, a fresh wave of betrayal washing over me. My own brother, documenting my humiliation? It couldn't be. Or could it? What kind of sick game was he playing? I opened my mouth to shout, to demand what he thought he was doing. But no sound came out. And just like that, he lowered the object and vanished into the stairwell. And I was left standing there, wondering if I was losing my mind. My, oh my. Just recounting this part has my heart fluttering like a trapped bird. Are you all still with me out there? It's a heavy load, I know. If you're gripping your seat wondering what in the Sam Hill my brother Thomas was really up to with that camera, and if I ever got any justice from that scoundrel Henderson, well, you best be subscribed, because the biggest twists are still to come. We're not even close to the end of this unbelievable mess. I didn't go in that Saturday. I just couldn't. I woke up that morning feeling like I'd been run over by a freight train, my body screaming for rest, my spirit just broken. I knew what it meant. I'd lose my job. But at that point, honey, I barely cared. The thought of facing Henderson again, of his leering and his bullying, it was more than I could bear. I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I was going to tell Arthur, how we were going to manage with a baby on the way and no income. The weight of the world felt like it was crushing me. Monday morning, I didn't go to Henderson Textiles. Instead, I wrote a short, polite letter of resignation, citing my health and the need to prepare for the baby's arrival. I didn't mention the abuse, the harassment, the cruelty. What was the point? Who would have listened back then? I asked a kindly neighbor, Mrs. Gable, to post it for me. And that was that, or so I thought. But you know how these things are. They're never really over when you think they are. A few days later, Thomas showed up at my little apartment. He looked awkward, shuffling his feet on my doorstep, holding his cap in his hands. "Heard you quit, Ellie," he said, his gaze fixed somewhere over my shoulder. "I did," I said, my voice flat. I was still hurt by his silence, by that strange incident with whatever he was holding that last day. His presence felt like rubbing salt in an open wound. "Couldn't take it anymore," he nodded slowly. "Henderson was a real piece of work." That was the most he'd ever said about it, the first tiny acknowledgement. "Are you going to be okay? With the baby and all?" "We'll manage," I said, trying to sound stronger than I felt. "Arthur will be home soon." I didn't invite him in. The hurt was too fresh. He lingered for a moment, like he wanted to say something more, something important. I could see it in the way he fidgeted, the way his brow furrowed. But then he just mumbled, "Well, take care of yourself, Ellie. And the little one." And he left. And that was the last I saw of Thomas for a long, long time. We just drifted apart after that. Life has a way of doing that, you know? Especially when there are unspoken things, like a great chasm hanging in the air between two people who once were close. Little Michael was born healthy and screaming that November. A beautiful, perfect baby boy with a shock of dark hair just like his father. Arthur came home a few months later, a changed man from the war, quieter, more somber, but so utterly thrilled to be a father. His joy was a balm to my weary soul. We struggled, of course. Money was terribly tight in those post-war years. But we had each other, and we had Michael. We decided to move away from that town, to start fresh somewhere new, somewhere Henderson's shadow couldn't reach. I got a part-time job at a local bakery once Michael started school. The smell of fresh bread was a comfort. Life went on. I rarely thought about Henderson Textiles. Or if I did, it was like a bad dream. Something from another lifetime. A dark chapter I'd tried to close. And Thomas? Well, he was a ghost from that same dream. We'd exchange polite Christmas cards, maybe a stilted phone call on birthdays if someone remembered. But the closeness we'd had as children, sharing secrets and scraped knees, was gone, buried under years of silence and what I believed to be his indifference to my suffering. How wrong I was. Decades passed. Can you believe it? Decades just flew by like leaves in an autumn wind. Michael grew up, got married, gave me beautiful grandchildren who are now grown themselves. Arthur, bless his soul, passed away peacefully, in his sleep when we were both in our 70s. I lived a good life, a full life, filled with love and laughter, and the usual ups and downs. But sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet and the old memories stirred, the image of Henderson would creep back in. His sneering face, his cruel words, the way he made me feel so small, so helpless, so utterly alone, and always, always, the lingering question about Thomas. Why had he just stood by? What was he doing with that strange box he was always carrying? The not knowing was a little thorn that pricked me now and then. Then, about 10 years ago, when I was nearly 90, I got a call. It was Thomas. His voice was older, raspier, a little shaky but unmistakable. He was living in a retirement community a few states over. He sounded frail, and there was an urgency in his tone. "Ellie," he said, "there's something I need to talk to you about. Something from a long, long time ago. From Henderson Textiles. Can I come visit? It's important." A part of me wanted to say no, to just let the past stay buried where it belonged. What good could come from digging up all that old pain? But another part, a curious part, a part that still felt that old sting of confusion and a tiny, flickering ember of hope for understanding, said yes. He arrived a week later, looking every bit his age. Thinner than I remembered, his hair white and sparse, but those same watchful, intelligent eyes. We sat in my little sunroom, the afternoon light slanting in, dust motes dancing in the beams. We sipped weak tea, the silence stretching between us, thick with unspoken things from nearly 70 years. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Ellie," he began, his hands trembling slightly as he reached into a worn leather briefcase he'd brought with him. It looked ancient. "Do you remember Henderson Textiles?" "How could I forget?" I said, my voice a little sharper than I intended. The memories even now could bring a flush of anger. "And Mr. Henderson?" he pressed gently. I just nodded, my throat suddenly tight. Here it comes, I thought. The explanation, or maybe an apology, or something else entirely. "I know you probably thought I didn't care," he said, his gaze fixed on the briefcase, not meeting my eyes. "That I just let him treat you that way." He paused, then pulled out something that made my breath catch in my throat. It wasn't a box this time. It was an old metal film canister. Small, round, like for an 8mm camera. "I wasn't just watching, Ellie," he said, finally looking up, his eyes filled with a sorrow so deep it made my own chest ache. I was filming. My heart felt like it stopped, then started again with a painful thud. "Filming? What do you mean you were filming?" The words came out in a strangled whisper. He took a shaky breath. "I filmed him, Ellie. I filmed what he did to you. All those times he yelled at you, humiliated you. When he got too close, when he touched your shoulder." He swallowed hard, the Adam's apple bobbing in his thin neck. "I got it all. Or as much as a scared 17-year-old kid with a second-hand movie camera could get without being caught by that monster." I stared at him, speechless. All these years? He'd filmed it? But why? What did he do with it? Was this some kind of cruel joke after all this time? "Why, Thomas?" I finally choked out, the room starting to spin. "Why would you do that? And why in God's name didn't you say anything? Do anything with it?" The questions tumbled out, laced, with decades of pent-up pain, confusion, and a desperate need for answers. What could he possibly show me on that old film reel that could explain his silence, his strange behavior, his apparent complicity all those years ago? My mind was racing, 1,000 possibilities flashing through it. Had he been trying to blackmail Henderson? Had he been too scared to act? Or was there something else? Something far more shocking, hidden on that dusty old film? Thomas looked down at his trembling hands, cradling that old film canister like it was a fragile bird's egg. I was just a kid, Ellie. 17 years old. Scared out of my wits, truth be told. Henderson was a monster, everyone in that office knew it, but he was powerful, connected. What could I do? Go to the police? Back then, they'd have laughed me right out of the station. A mailroom boy accusing the town bigwig of being a bully? And who would believe me without proof? Solid proof? His voice was barely a whisper, filled with the remembered fear of a boy. So, the camera, the filming, I prompted, my own voice. shaking, needing to understand. It was a new hobby, he explained, his eyes pleading with me to understand his youthful actions. I'd saved up for months from my meager wages to buy that little 8mm camera from a pawn shop. I was fascinated by capturing moments, and when I saw what Henderson was doing to you day after day, how he was making you so miserable, especially when you were, well, expecting Michael. He trailed off, then continued. I don't know, Ellie. Something just snapped inside me. I thought, if I could get proof, real, undeniable proof, maybe then someone would listen. Maybe I could stop him. Maybe I could help you. He told me how he'd sneak the camera into work in his satchel, hiding it under mailbags. How he'd find excuses to be near Henderson's office. How he'd hide in the mailroom doorway or behind, stacks of boxes in the corridor, trying to catch Henderson in the act. He described the terror he felt every time he pressed the record button, his heart pounding, terrified of being caught, knowing Henderson would ruin him, probably get him arrested for something. I didn't know what I was doing, really. He confessed, a flush rising on his wrinkled cheeks. I just knew it was wrong, what he was doing to you. And I felt so damn helpless. You were my big sister. My mind was reeling. All those times I'd seen him lurking, clutching that box. He hadn't been indifferent, or worse, enjoying my distress. He'd been documenting, trying, in his own clumsy, terrified 17-year-old way, to gather evidence against a tyrant. The anger I'd held onto for so long, the bitterness, it began to soften, to crumble, replaced by a dawning, aching understanding. My poor, brave, foolish little brother. But what happened to the film, Thomas? I asked, my voice gentle now. Did you ever show it to anyone? Did you try to use it? He sighed, a deep, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of all those intervening years. That's the hardest part, Ellie. After you quit, I tried. I really did. I developed the film myself, in a makeshift darkroom I rigged up in my bedroom closet, using my mother's old pots and pans. It wasn't Hollywood quality, of course. Shaky and grainy in parts, the sound patchy where I'd managed to get any with that rudimentary microphone attachment I'd cobbled together. He paused, then continued, his voice dropping lower. But it was clear enough. You could see him. You could hear his voice, that bullying tone. I took it to Mr. Abernathy, Henderson's business partner. You remember him? A quieter man, seemed more decent than Henderson, at least on the surface. And, I pressed, leaning forward, my own hands now clasped tightly in my lap. Thomas shook his head, the memory clearly still painful. He watched it, the whole reel. His face got whiter and whiter with every passing minute. Then he handed it back to me. He said, Son, I believe you. This is appalling. But if this gets out, it'll destroy the company. It'll destroy Henderson. Yes, but a lot of innocent people will lose their jobs in the scandal. I can't let that happen. Then, Lord have mercy, Ellie. He offered me money to keep quiet. A substantial sum for a kid like me back then. Good heavens, I breathed, aghast. Did you take it? My heart sank at the thought. No, Thomas said, his voice firm, a spark of his youthful defiance flashing in his old eyes. I didn't want his blood money. I just wanted him to do something about Henderson, to make him stop. But he wouldn't commit. He just said he'd handle Henderson internally, keep a closer eye on him. I didn't believe him for a second. He looked so defeated, even all these years later. So I kept the film. I didn't know what else to do with it. I was scared to go to the newspapers. Henderson had friends everywhere. Scared Henderson would find out and come after me, or worse, after you, even though you'd left. So I just I hid it. For all these years. It felt like a massive failure. Like I'd let you down when you needed me most. Tears were streaming down my face now. Not tears of anger or old pain, but of relief, understanding, a profound sorrow for the burden my young brother had carried alone for so long. My poor brother. He hadn't been a silent accomplice. He'd been a terrified boy trying to be a hero, in the only way he knew how, with the only tool he had. "Oh, Thomas," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I reached across the small table between us and took his frail, liver-spotted hand. It felt so fragile in mine. "You didn't let me down. You were so brave. Just a boy, trying to do a man's job. He looked at me then, his own eyes wet with unshed tears. But I didn't stop him, Ellie. Not really." "But you tried," I insisted. "And you kept this all these years? This proof?" "I couldn't bring myself to throw it away," he said, his voice choked. It felt important, like it was the only tangible truth of what happened in that awful office. He then told me something that made my jaw drop. "A few years after you left, Henderson did suddenly retire, very abruptly, out of the blue. The official story was ill health, of course, but Abernathy, his partner, took over fully. The company actually did much better under him, became a more decent place to work, I heard." Thomas gave a small, wry smile. "I always wondered." A little while before his retirement, I sent an anonymous package to Mrs. Henderson. Just one, of the film reels. No note, nothing. I never knew if she watched it, or what she did if she did. But his retirement came pretty quick after that. Maybe, just maybe, it made some difference. You won't believe what she said next. Well, what I said next. I said, "Thomas, do you think we could watch it?" And we did. We found an old projector in my attic, a relic from when Michael was young, and after some fiddling, Thomas got it working. We sat there, in the dim light of my living room, and watched those flickering images from nearly 70 years ago. There, I was, young and pregnant, my face etched with worry and fatigue. And there was Henderson, larger than life on my wall, his voice booming, his gestures menacing. It was painful to watch, deeply so, but also incredibly validating. I hadn't imagined it. It was real. My suffering was real. And my brother, my quiet, observant brother, had been my silent witness, my secret archivist, trying to fight my battles when I couldn't. After the last reel clattered to an end, we sat in silence for a long, long time. The only sound was the whirring of the projector cooling down. Then I turned to Thomas. "Thank you," I said, my voice full of a gratitude that words could barely express. "Thank you for trying to protect me then. And thank you for showing me this now. It means more than you will ever know." He just squeezed my hand, a shy smile on his face. The weight of all those years, all those unspoken words, all that misunderstanding, it just lifted from my shoulders, and I think from his, too. It was like a dam had broken, and all the bitterness and confusion washed away, leaving only a kind of sad, tender understanding, and a renewed love for the brother I thought I'd lost. We talked for hours that day, truly talked. For the first time in nearly 70 years, we reconnected. We healed a wound that had festered for too long. And honey, that's the thing about life. It can throw you some terrible curveballs. People can hurt you in ways you never thought possible. Secrets can fester and divide. But sometimes, just sometimes, there's a little bit of light that finds its way through the cracks. Even after all hope seems lost. Thomas wasn't perfect. He was scared, and he made choices based on that fear. But his heart, bless him, was in the right place. He tried to do right by me, in his own flawed, human way. And in the end, that's what mattered. He gave me back a piece of my past, a piece I didn't even know I needed to reclaim. And in doing so, he gave us both a future, a chance to be brother and sister again for the time we have left. It was a truly good and satisfying end to a very dark chapter. So, that's my story. A long and winding road, wasn't it? But we got there. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think? Could you forgive someone who stood by like Thomas did, even knowing his intentions were good in the end? Or do you think he should have done more, sooner? Was he brave, or just a boy in over his head? Me conta ahí nos comentarios. I really want to know what you think. And hey, if you enjoyed this trip down memory lane and you're hungry for more true life tales with all their twists and turns, and believe me, at my age, I've got a trunk full. Make sure you give this video a big thumbs up, and please, if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you don't miss the next story from this old gal. I've got plenty more where this one came from. Thanks for listening, dearies. It does an old heart good to share these things.